Do you ever have questions about money and finances? Does it leave you feeling anxious or uncertain? We'll discuss this and more on this episode of Walking Worthy in the Workplace and Life. Well, welcome to Walking Worthy podcast, which is a ministry of the Christian Working Woman. I'm Julie Busteed, and with me today is Lauren Stibgen.
Hey, Julie. It's great to be in studio today.
Yes, and our special guest today is Valerie Hogan.
Thank you for having me in, Julie.
Oh, we're so glad to have you. And I'm just going to give a brief bio. Valerie holds a law degree and is an author and certified financial planner. Currently, she's working with Clearwater Capital Partners in private wealth. She's served in churches, leading groups and individuals towards stewardship with Christian financial concepts, Crown Financial Peace University. She loves to assist people overcome financial obstacles and experience more freedom and to be more generous and to do more ministry. I love that. And she's also co-authored a book with her mom, Miriam Neff, Wise Women Managing Money. So, Valerie, tell us a little about your role, where you currently work now, what in your ministries you're involved in, and then why did you write this book?
I'm currently doing wealth management and family office services with Clearwater Capital Partners. So my law and finance background helped me walk with families, just helping them understand their current wealth picture and how to kind of navigate their legacy, estate strategy, investment strategy, tax strategy, all that fun stuff.
That's a lot.
But that's been a continuing thread. I would say it's been a serendipitous journey, except for that we know it's not serendipitous, that God is kind of weaving this mosaic, right? So all along I've worked with families back from when my husband and I served with Crown Financial and with Christian Financial Concepts, Larry Burkett, as budget counselors at church, all the way up through my law, the times that I was practicing in law, all the way through finance, through philanthropy, and then was working with planned giving with churches and now working with families. So all along we're walking with folks to help them, I would say, steward well and also to be generous with their finances. So my mom has a widow's ministry.
Right.
So where the book came from and where the ministry and nonprofit work that I do with her came from is really in her ministry, right on the heels of grief. There are all kinds of questions about finance, right?
Yeah.
So she would often kind of lean over the backyard fence and say, Val, I think this might be fraud, or what do you think of this question? And we compiled kind of a frequently asked questions, and that became video series, and it became a book with Moody Publishers, and on the story goes. So
that's so good.
Yeah. So you talked about serving. A lot of our audience isn't familiar with this term, private wealth or family office, and I think you started to explain it really well, Val. You have always come along families, just even in ministry at church, looking at something as simple as a household budget, all the way to very complex issues like what do we do, how do we steward well in the presence of the passing of a loved one. The concept and issue of stewardship of money, it just touches almost every aspect of our life. So can you tell our audience a little bit about just this broad spectrum of how you view our role as stewards of our finances, as followers of Jesus Christ?
Boy, that is a
big question.
It is a big question. But I think a couple things. So, Christ cared about what we do with money. And I think sometimes, in ministry, if we're a little nervous to talk about it, or if we know that others have maybe not talked about it too well, we'll back off and say, oh, it's time, talent, treasure. And that's true. But half of the parables were actually about the handling of money. And so I think Christ was saying something to us about how much that would grab our heart and how much, that we could just get distracted, diverted. And so I look at it as, we're all stewarding things that are His. And so we start kind of from that way. And we're all called to be good steward and wise. We don't have to master every single detail about it, but knowing where we can get resources, having a heart to steward well, having a heart to learn. So I think there's that aspect. And then God has created us to be working, productive, to be value creators, whether that's actually in a paid role or whether we're creating paid roles for others or in the home. I mean, we're called to just be productive and to create value wherever we are. So when we create value, it does create income and resources from that. So I think it all kind of strands together.
Absolutely.
Yeah. I love that. And so in working with the churches and all the different families that you've worked with, have you seen different views from generation to generation on money, how to handle it and the giving side of it and all of that?
Yeah. Definitely. And I would say, we can make some generalizations, but there's always lots of exceptions to the rules.
Right.
But if you just look at what previous generations have gone through. So previous generations that have experienced the Great Depression, or if their parents did, the kind of household, the kind of fear they would have lived through. Yeah. And then maybe long periods of prosperity. Then we see like the 2008, financial crash. So folks that kind of came of age and were aware of these things happening at the time, or, the dot bomb. So I think you can see through generations. You definitely see maybe a little bit more frugality in older generations, maybe because it's the experience with the Great Depression, but then that's coming around again in next gen where they've had a difficult time, right, with things being so expensive.
Well, and we also see, especially with some of the younger generations coming into the workforce, they're having a very hard time finding employment. Yeah. The workforce is changing so significantly right now, and we have this occurrence where we have these young adults, again, coming back to live with their parents. Yes. And just generationally looking at all of the different ways that the economy or the markets, as you've talked about, different things that have happened, all of them touch money, but they also impact us very socially as well. So with these generational differences, just thinking about these, and as we think about some of our audience listening today, because we have every generation that listens to our podcast here.
That's great.
What best advice would you have for a woman just starting her career?
Well, there's all kinds of things, right? There's advice about the work, but then, we're working to earn income. And so I think sometimes when we're a little bit younger, we may feel like we're going to have this ability to create value forever in the same way. And I would say it's not necessarily true.
We feel that, don't we?
I'm feeling it quite a bit these days. But I would say, a thought about the future and putting away and the power of some savings, the power of some good stewardship, good wisdom. I would say, get advice, get wisdom. I think there may be a hesitation to ask older generations for wisdom, but I think they're happy to give it. And so, the Bible talks about get wisdom like above all, right? Yeah. And so it's precious. Go get it like it's gold. And so I would tell young women, get wisdom, get advice, ask people about their journey, and then realize, you have certain windows of time where the body might be a little hardier and can, work harder, create value.
Yes.
And so, the power of compound interest over a long period of time can be a real force for good for your family, for kingdom, and for generosity. So to keep that in the back of your mind, when you're out there able to just crush it physically, but you also have maybe some things to learn, as we all do.
Yeah, and really, as you were describing overall the different generations and how they consider money, you use the word fear. Do you see fear a lot? And then what would you tell us from a biblical perspective about how we're experiencing this fear, whether it's fear of scarcity or fear over aging, whatever it might be?
Yeah. Well, the Bible talks a lot about don't have fear, like fear not, fear not. How many verses begin with that? In perfect love, there is no fear, right? So many, many times, one of the things God, when he's going to speak to someone directly, he starts with fear not. Now, there's a healthy fear of God,
right?
But I think it's a robber of our potential, right? I think there are some good risks that we could be taking, and I think fear just cuts that off. And I don't mean, YOLO, let's all go jump off a cliff and not know how far it is down. I don't mean that kind of risk, but I do mean being bold, following where the Lord is leading. I think fear can can be a number one interrupter of that. So no fear on a bumper sticker is a great thing, although maybe like cerebral fear is okay. And so maybe just a bit of caution.
Absolutely. I was going to go back to like that advice for a woman just starting out. Is there like a general rule of thumb, like you should save this much and give this much, that you would kind of just get the ball rolling for them, that you would even say that? Or if the company has a policy, like a 401k or whatever, how much to put, all those kinds of things.
I mean, it drives people nuts when people in my role say it depends.
Yeah, I know.
However, it depends. Are they drowning in debt? Do they have no debt? It kind of, there's a little bit of that, but I would say put away savings while you can. If you're used to pizza and ramen noodles in college and you get your first job and it's like, woohoo, but use a little bit of that, the way that you were able to dial down spending and, use a little bit of harness the power of that frugality to go and be able to put away. And certainly if a company is going to match and you can take advantage of that, our industry likes to say that's free money. So in many cases, it is really smart to go after that. I'd save what you can. I mean, sometimes people can save, just put away 10%. Sometimes when folks are young and they don't have a lot of expenses, they can put away half their income. Right. I would just gauge, maybe it's almost, I would say folks are very hesitant to start saving and they may save a tiny bit. Start anywhere would be my advice. Right. But you could also start with what might seem like a whole lot and dial it down if you have to.
That's a good thought too, right? Yeah. Good.
Well, on the opposite end, what about those of our audience that are considering a retirement career transition? Here at the Christian Working Women, we like to call it reinvention, right? We love to just encourage different periods of our life so that we're always doing the Lord's work.
Yes.
We're never retired. So, but for someone who is transitioning maybe out of that traditional work pattern, what advice do you have about money at that point?
Well, we don't know what's coming up ahead, although we know that historically we get about 3% inflation. And some people might be like, Val, what are you talking about? It's like 9% or 6%. I would say average, because we had years where it was at 0. But, you really need to be still growing funds that are in savings over the long term, because you really got to beat, money is going to lose a little bit of its value every year. Right. So I would also just say count the cost. And also, as far as what is that going to look like, can you project out how much you might need? Can you afford to stay in the place you're living? Do you need to look at a less expensive place? Right. Will you have family that might need to move in with you? Looking out into the future to try to see what some of your needs might be. We also have this kind of American value, I think, of like, well, we're just going to retire, drive around on the golf course or, do knitting or whatever, hang out by the pool and not be productive. Right. And there's stats about how when we do that, we actually live shorter lives because, back to when we were talking about how God created us to create value and be productive, even if it's not for pay. I think there's something about how, he tells us for our own good. Yep. You're created that way. Keep going.
Yeah. Theology
very,
of work.
very true.
Well, have you seen in your experience some kind of common mistakes or pitfalls that women are making?
I do. I do see that.
And how can we avoid them?
Yeah, the whole.
And am I doing them?
And am I doing them?
Yeah, so the whole book was kind of a FAQ. I'll just kind of think through some highlights, but definitely the fear thing. And I mean, research even shows, the industry that I'm in, so the financial industry, even markets differently historically to women and based on fear. They will market more, quote unquote, secure types of investments to them, but things that are super secure and super safe. So they dial into that. Yeah. They may not outpace inflation. They may not provide the growth that's needed, the boldness, right? And so I would say, don't be too fearful. You really, and get knowledge, run the spreadsheet, run the modeling, see what you can do.
Yeah.
I don't mean to go crazy and be risky with everything. But then the other thing is, I think there are a lot of women that don't necessarily understand, and we do tend to outlive the guys. And so, so sorry, but I'm just reporting the news. I'm not creating it. And so like in 80% of marriages, he will graduate on before she does. And so the question is, not only is there enough for retirement, but does she know what her strategy is going to be for the long term? Does she know what estate documents are saying? Does she know what that's going to look like?
Right.
And I don't necessarily mean have you gone over with a fine-tooth pen the 78-page document, but, could you chart it out? Or could someone provide a chart and where what's going to happen? So I also think it could be a mistake. It is a mistake when I've heard several, even guys say, well, she's not interested in the finances. She doesn't like to do the finances. And it's like
denial.
My guess is something bad happened along the way where she felt kind of stupid. Maybe there was a jargon word or something thrown out. But don't tell me that she's not interested in her livelihood, kids, family, the causes she loves, the church she loves. She's interested in finances, maybe not the spreadsheet and maybe not the news.
Right.
Right.
You've said a couple of things, and I think it's really important to just talk to our audience very simply because spreadsheets and running the numbers can feel extremely overwhelming. So as you're talking to someone that has never built a spreadsheet or doesn't understand a return, what do you have anywhere you could point someone in our audience to just understand the basic jargon or find a way to calculate those returns or to be bold, frankly? Where do they go?
This is one good way we can use AI, I think. People can do their own research. So number one, if you have a financial planner, if you have a estate planning attorney, you can ask for things in the way that you learn. You can say, that's really great information. Thanks for the spreadsheet. Can I have it in a pie chart? Because I'd rather see it that way.
Yeah.
And so I'd say be bold, with folks that you're already working with and paying. So I might get a lot of grief from that later on. But it's like, hey, they're providing a service they need to, if you don't understand your plan, it's not your plan. The other thing is, there's great mortgage calculators, retirement calculators,
like
compound,
online?
Yes, and a compound interest. And we have all these different AI tools. And so I would say that's a great use of that. So either if you're working with someone already, ask them in a way you understand, but you can actually, we're not chained to Excel anymore. Thank the Lord.
I know, I agree. I know that also I would encourage the women listening today that oftentimes if you are employed and have a 401k, the 401k providers have a plethora of online resources for learning, including some of those calculators and risk tolerance tools that you're mentioning. You also use the term estate plan. And I think sometimes as women, we don't feel like we have an estate. Estate feels grand. Estate feels large, but really it's just a fancy term for the stuff you have.
Yes,
all the stuff you have. And so I don't want, the fear.
Yes.
I want to tell the women listening today that you don't have to have some grand estate as you're thinking about it in your mind to have an estate plan. Can you speak to that a little?
I agree. And so, and even as I'm talking with folks, I'll tell them, ask if you don't know the meaning of a word, ask about it. But you're right. Estate can feel grand. And I've talked to so many folks that say, well, I don't really have anything. It's like, interesting. Do you own your home? These are folks that are, beyond retirement.
Yeah.
And is there a mortgage on it? No. Okay. Well, actually, you have an asset. Well, that's another big word, right?
Big word, right.
But an asset is a stuff.
Yeah. Right.
So,
it's a stuff.
It has a little bit more, gravitas to the word, but basically when you boil it down. And so, yes, as far as an estate plan, it's just what's going to happen to you and your stuff or your family stuff when you pass away. And folks don't want to think about that. It's not a happy thought.
You're right.
So it's intimidating, and it's like, but I mean, it's a natural thing. 100% of folks pass away.
Guaranteed.
Right? I mean, there were a few that got called in their chariots home, but I wouldn't count on that strategy, right? So I think it's also very loving to prepare an easier way for those that are, our kids or our extended family that's going to come, after us. So yes, it's most don't have maybe a grand estate, but we can all plan to make it easier for those that are going to, come after we graduate to heaven, to have a smoother and to be good stewards of our stuff when we're done using it.
Absolutely.
Right. I don't know if you can answer. You might say, "Oh, you need to go to a counselor." But have you come across like a married couple where they're on different pages about how to spend money, how to save money, how to deal with money? And if that's the situation, what would be your counsel?
I'd love to say 100% of the time. That may be a little bit of an overshoot, but most of the time. I mean, there's this old...
Oh, really?
I believe it's a Larry Burkett quote that he said, and I love this because it's very gracious, but if both of you are the same, then one of you is unnecessary.
Well, that's true, but still, I mean,
yes,
you can be on the same page about...
Yeah. And as far as overall goals, but I think...
overall goals,
the fact that there's two... I mean, I see it so much, right? The fact that you've got just two distinct human beings that have had sometimes radically different backgrounds with money. I think, a core thing, especially if there's a disagreement, I think it's great to look back and just for a couple to ask her, what's your experience? What's your earliest experience with money? Or what was your family like? I mean, here's a case on point. My husband's parents had longevity, right? I mean, well into their 80s and even some 90s in their family. And then my dad actually passed at 64. And so that's an experience that makes a big impact. So, I also saw my parents save, and they were planning for big things in retirement, and then actually that happened. And so I think when you know where somebody's coming from, but then if I just went with my view, and my husband's like, well,
you can't take it with you.
Let's go. Let's go. And he's like, well, but we might have to need it for another 30 years, so you can't go all in right now, or we're going to be begging on the corner. So that's not a good strategy either. But I think, too, a great question, I think, for couples and folks in general that are not understanding where someone is, like, tell me more about that. I think that helps. It's not a fix-all, but it's, I think, a good starter.
That's a good strategy,
I love what you said, and going back to how women are receiving communication about finance and money. The marketing has been soft. It is leading us down pathways to secure, maybe less bold, lower return opportunities.
Right.
So what have you seen as of recent that might be changing for women? Do you think that the marketing is going to change?
That's a good question.
I certainly hope so. But I still see just certain things marketed toward guys and certain things. I mean, if you just think of all of it in luxury goods, what things are marketed to guys, what things are marketed to women. In general, commercials, what things are geared, what isn't. And in financial services, I think it can be the same. Or presumptions. If you're over a certain age, you're probably looking at this kind of product, right? So I dislike that intensely. And I think one of the things I think that's got to change for women with this great wealth transfer. So there's statistics about how women are going to be, they will hold, and these changes, the market changes, but over half the United States wealth within the next few years. And it just keeps going. Why is that? Because women are widowed. They're in different kinds of jobs now. They might marry and remarry. I mean, there's just all kinds of inheritance and living longer. And so one of the things I love to advocate with women is the how important it will be for women to do deal making. And I very rarely see how it's marketed to women as deal makers. But if we're going to hold half the wealth in the United States and we're going to be scared, so what does scared money do? It socks it away. Well, then who's buying, selling? Who's funding the next big businesses to come along, right? The women in the Bible, not scared. right? Proverbs 31 woman, marketer of luxury goods, purple cloth, right?
Yeah.
Venture capital, private equity. She was going to look at a field to buy. But we don't see that. We never hear about that. I mean, the women were the big contributors to Christ ministries, to Paul's ministries. Those are bold. I mean, they're putting money into some pretty new ventures, right? There were no former Christs walking the earth before. I mean, so women were sticking their neck out to say, here we go. This is new, right? Yeah. So I don't see that marketed to yet, but I just, it's got to, because what is going to happen to our society, kingdom, our folks out there that want to build businesses, employ other people, do great things for other people if there's not a boldness.
It's so interesting that you say that, because I think about luxury automobile commercials, and I never see women getting into those sports cars, Valerie. Oh, my goodness.
Right. Or driving them
in the commercial.
Right? Yeah, they're always trying to carefully get their, dress and heels in there properly, right?
Oh, my
Which
goodness.
is, I mean, there's a lot of history around that, but I just think it's going to have to change, and it's going to have to change quick.
Yeah. So we need to not be fearful. We need to be bold, and we need to be deal makers.
Yeah, absolutely. Not be afraid. And it's interesting, the history, right? I think even as a Christian woman, I mean, we were taught, you don't necessarily ask the guys out. They ask us.
Right.
But then how does that transfer into deal making, right? Or when we want to vet a new purchase, when we want to go into a private deal. Well, we have that kind of odd background. Now, I do think that's changing, but can it change fast enough? It can't for me anyway.
So you mentioned the Proverbs 31 woman, but do you have a favorite wise woman in the Bible that managed money?
Boy, I mean, there's a lot, right? I mean, I do love that, especially because I think I always had this kind of, Proverbs 31 woman. She's kind of sweet. It's like flannel graph lady, right? She's so sweet. She's at home baking. I'm like, actually, she's out there doing venture capital and private equity. And by the way, her husband is not weeping on the side of the road because he's being overshadowed by her. He's out there doing his own thing.
My wife is great.
Yeah, he's out at the gate counseling others, and he's doing his thing. And I mean, I love that. But I mean, I love Abigail. I mean, she was pretty bold, right? I mean, her husband kind of overlooked the future king, and she's like, wait a minute, we might want to invest a little bit in this. She was a peacemaker, right? And she also went, this didn't go well. I think I can do something about this, right?
I never thought of Abigail that way. Yeah.
Yeah, she wrote out, she made a gift offering, she was generous, but she's also pretty savvy, right?
Yeah.
Because she ended up on the right side of that equation, didn't she?
Did.
So.
Yes, she did.
Yeah.
I think it's interesting as you talk about the Proverbs 31 woman, and I recently in one of our devotionals talked about the fact that we miss the point that it is the king's mother giving him the advice of this is the type of woman that you need to marry.
Yes.
So it is a mother giving advice, son, you need to be with a bold, industrious, deal-making woman who's
Fearless.
employing people and being bold for your household.
And she's honoring to her husband in the process. And he's not intimidated by that in the least.
Exactly.
We pick up none of that in that story, right? I love that. Yeah, and it's the mom.
It is the mom. It is great. It is great.
Well, do you have any kind of closing thoughts or advice, comments for those that are just kind of...
And we could talk more.
I know, we could talk so much more.
We could talk so much more. I mean, just what we've touched on, take a look at whether fear is driving some of your decisions. And I would take that to the Lord and really examine that. I mean, is it a caution or is it flat out fear?
Right.
Right? And is it realistic? I know we can tend to have this well, what if this goes wrong? But what if it goes right? Is that maybe what God has us to step into? So less fear, more boldness, more community together. I think, getting wisdom from each other, getting encouragement from each other to go forward.
Absolutely.
So good, yeah.
Where can women find your book and more about your ministry?
We have the Wise Women Managing Money website. It's published by Moody Publishers, so the book is there. It's on all kinds of other retailers, Amazon and everywhere else. So, they can get good resources there.
Wonderful.
Yeah.
Well, it has been so great to spend time with both of you today to talk about these issues, these important issues. And we just pray that it's been an encouragement and blessing to all of you and as we seek to walk worthy in the workplace and in life.